Hello and welcome to the 15th episode of Soccer by Paul and Hady. As usual, one of your hosts, Hady Raphael from culturesoccer.com. And I'm joined, as usual, by Paul Vance. Hey, Paul, how are you today?
Hey, I'm good, Hady. How are you? Hello, everyone. How's things been, Hady? It's been a while since we had a chat, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's been a while because we were, I think, both very busy with our life and stuff. It's been a little bit less than 1 month, and we didn't do any podcasts yet. So you know what? I'm excited because we have a lot to talk about. I've been okay, and you know what? I've watched all the playoffs, the MLS playoffs, and everything. It was very exciting. I'm not really a fan of the format without the two legs, but you know what? It was exciting for the neutrals. I think it was not exciting for the fans of the teams, in my opinion. But for the neutrals, I think it was very exciting. How did you like that new format there?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're right. Life sometimes gets in the way of football, doesn't it? Unfortunately, but on the MLS playoffs, for a championship to have credibility, I think the playoffs need to have two legs, and for that reason, I don't like them. I also don't like them because it robs home fans of, for instance, if it had been, I think, Washington D.C. Or did Toronto go to Washington and win, or did they beat? Yeah, they did, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Yeah. Okay. So then maybe Toronto, but the team, I think, finishing in last place in the last playoff spot will never get a home playoff game, even if it goes right to the final. And I think that is really unfair on the fans. Don't like the format. I agree with you. A lot of the games are very exciting, very interesting, great box office for the TV fan. Not fair on the match going fan.
Yeah, no, Toronto didn't win at DC. They won at home against DC, and then the rest of the games they played away. So they played in New York City, in the Mets stadium there, and they won against New York City FC. Then they played in Atlanta, and then they played in Seattle.
Okay, so what I should have said then was, if you were a DC fan and your team went all the way in MLS Cup, you wouldn't have seen them play at home.
No,
not fair.
Not fair at all. And yeah, that's I completely agree with you. And I said it on different platforms that this new format doesn't really excite me as a fan, but it's really nice, like I said, as for the neutrals, because you're able to see a game. There's a very high intensity, of course, in the game, because it's either you win and you go on, or you lose and that's it, you're out. So you have to give it like 120%. So for neutrals, it's pretty nice. But if I was let's say a season ticket holder for Toronto, never, but if I was a season ticket holder for Toronto, I don't think I'll be very happy to see that. I was only able to see that first game and not the rest, and not the MLS Cup, and not anything. So it's very weird for me.
Yeah, but it affects the purity of the competition too. The whole idea of MLS Cup is to discover the best team, right? And when you've got playoff games over just 90 minutes, anybody can win a game in 90 minutes.
Exactly.
So it becomes a lottery. I just don't like the format. I don't think it serves the purpose it's intended to do, unless I've got that wrong. But for me, MLS Cup is supposed to discover the best team in the continent, right? And I'm not sure that format lends itself.
Exactly, and I completely agree with you. But let's move on with our podcast. We have a lot to talk about. The first thing, of course, I would like to start with that game, but we're going to talk about the impact a bit later. There's a few things, of course, the head coach Thierry Henry that we're going to talk about, and we're going to talk, of course, about the protected players list, or the players that are eligible for the MLS expansion draft. They just came out this morning. We're Saturday today. It's about 11:10 a.m. and the list came out maybe 10 minutes ago. We're going to talk about this later, but first I want to talk about that game yesterday between the U.S. national team and the Canadian national team that was played in Orlando. Don't forget that on the 15th of October, Canada won 2-0 against the United States. They won 2-0, and it was a really good game where we had Canadian players like really, really into it, really tactically sound, very, very, very intelligent in their decisions and everything. It was the first win for the Canadian national team since for maybe 34 years, if I'm not mistaken. And you know what? Yesterday was the return leg, if you want to, or the game that was played in Orlando. So in the States, we had a U.S. team, a weakened U.S. team without Michael Bradley, without Josie Altidore, without Christian Pulisic, without Zach Steffen. And you know what? A big, 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 big disappointment. 4-1 win for the U.S. What do you think about it, Paul?
What a difference a month makes, eh?
Yeah, hell yeah.
Do you know what? We're back to the drawing board, I'm afraid, and I think there's going to be more ups and downs like this as Canada continues to move forward and hopefully improves. And I think there has been improvement, so I don't think we should lose sight of that. But last night was a huge step backwards. It was a very poor start by the Canadians. I think you're going into this massive game, and of course the game last month was a massive game too. But you'd kind of you'd put a stake in the ground. You'd beaten them 2-0. You should have been in a position where you're going into this game last night, where play in cautiously, make sure you do the right things. We do. What does Canada do? But they concede a goal after 90 seconds, and a bad goal at that too. Right from the point of it actually looked like a poor corner kick. And I thought Jonathan David could have done better in getting to the ball earlier than Dest. Dest flicked the ball in, and an unmarked player 6 yards out in Jordan Morris slammed the ball into the net. Now, you're talking about a corner after 90 seconds in a big game that really should be decided by fine margins. And within 90 seconds, you got this striker like nobody near him standing in the 6 yard box, hammering the ball in the net. Just not acceptable. And the team, for me, it looked as if the occasion, even though there wasn't a big crowd there, and I thought that might have helped or worked in Canada's favour. But I actually felt that the Canadian team were not big enough for the occasion.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. They weren't big enough, I think, mentally, and I think tactically also there was a small problem there. What I didn't understand, and that's for me, it's the main issue in that game. I understand that as a head coach, as of course national team manager. What you want to do is, of course, put your players in the best position possible, okay? I completely understand that he has tough choices to make, John Herdman. And I understand that sometimes you're going to do like tactical twists, you're going to turn things around, and you're going to try to be intelligent, you're going to try to be tactically superior to the coach that you're fighting with. But I don't think that was the game for John Herdman to be that intelligent. I think that the same starting 11 that we got at home should have been yesterday in Orlando. And what I don't understand is that John Herdman made so many changes, and for me, unexplicable changes. The first one is, I'm sorry, you had a good pair of central defenders with Cornelius and Steven Vittoria that did very well in the first game, and you just put Cornelius on the bench and you put Henry back, and we know how much Henry had a very bad game last time around, and he got a red card, and that's why he was suspended last time. So why not renew your renew your trust in Cornelius and Vittoria? That's the first decision. The second decision, that a big decision that John Herdman made, was playing Alphonso Davies as left back. And for me, and I've said it a thousand times, Alphonso Davies is not a left back. Yes, he could be a very good left back in the future. Yes, maybe Bayern Munich wants to make him as a left back, but it's going to take time. At this level, for this very important game, it was very important for Alphonso Davies to be where he was, where he is the most lethal, the most effective, and that's as a left winger and not as a left back. And you know what? You're gonna. We talked about it. I think on our last episode, or maybe in the just you and me off record. I'm not really sure, but I know I talked about it with you. What I liked about that defense, that Canadian defense before, was that you had Richie Larea as a right fullback, and we know Richie Larea. He's very offensive, and it was really nice to have Kamal Miller as a left back, because he's usually a central defender, so he doesn't go up that much. So it was really nice because, it was a bit balanced, because Larea was way up high, and you'll see Kamal Miller just, dropping back and making sure that, that the opponent is not counterattacking with only two central defenders, in transition. And yesterday we saw exactly the opposite. We saw exactly on I think on two of the four goals, or even three of the four goals, we saw that at the beginning of the action, there was Alphonso Davies way up high, Richie Larea way up high, and you had only Steven Vittoria and Thierry Henry all alone there with Samuel Piet trying to do as much as he can. We know exactly how the United States play. They play with a very dense midfield, so it's very important to have a bit more bodies in transition, and we didn't have those bodies there. So you know what? I really, for me, I'm not going to say it's 100% a mistake and the fault of John Herdman, but for me, he's a big. His choices are a big reason why Canada lost yesterday.
Yeah, as much as he got it right a month ago, I agree with you. I think that he kind of got it wrong last night. I'm not a huge fan of the Canadian back four, and I would have said that before the game in October as well, but they surprised me. And the back four that night did exceptionally well. And the other thing I'll say about that too is, especially when you're at home, there can be more pressure on the back four because the onus is on the team to attack, whereas you go away from home and you can sit in, right? So, in many ways for the back four, the game in Toronto, it was potentially a more difficult game. And I think the fact that, first of all, that he played Alphonso Davies at left back, and the last time I saw Alphonso Davies play left back for Canada was the Hady debacle, right? And he didn't do well at left back that time either. Yes, I know he's played left back for Bayern Munich, but he's probably playing left back for a team that's always superior to the opposition in the Bundesliga, so it's maybe a little bit easier. I don't know. But I know this. There was one player in the Canadian team that really struck fear in the hearts of the Americans, and that was Alphonso Davies. And when they came out to start the game and they saw him lining up at left back, they must have been absolutely delighted. So, I think we missed a trick there for sure. And I think some of this stuff, I didn't think Davies had an outstanding game, but in fact he didn't. But some of the stuff he did in the second half showed you exactly why the Canadians held so much fear around Davies. In fact, in the 84th minute, I think he was surrounded by about four American defenders, and he slalomed past about three of them and almost created a chance. The guy's got that type of ability. The guys would have concerned the Americans, and Ned had two guys watching him, and we missed a trick playing him at left back. And again, I feel a bit for Kamal Miller, who came in at left back a month ago and did very well. As for Thierry Henry, he had a nightmare. I don't think there's too much more you can say about that. Lost his man a couple of times for the second and third goals, and he just had a nightmare. He came off injured 3 minutes into the second half. Was he fully fit before the game? You have to assume that he was, or surely he wouldn't have started. But you get the impression that the Vittoria Cornelius tandem in the first game probably should have been repeated last night. And yeah, it's easy being wise after the event, but I would underline that. I think he should have stuck with the central defensive pairing that he had in Toronto as well. So, it's very, very disappointing. And I think as well, John Herdman still learning the game at men's international level. He's a great motivator. He's great with all these words of inspiration and all the rest. I think we need to see him step up to the plate tactically yet. Say he absolutely got it right a month ago in Toronto, but he certainly didn't get it right tonight, and he didn't get it right in the other big game that we played this year against Hady.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? It happens. It's just, it's really a pity that it happens in those big games. It happened in the quarterfinals of the Gold Cup, and now it happens against the US, where we really needed at least a draw in order to go through in the competition in the CONCACAF Nations League, and of course to solidify our sixth place in the FIFA ranking, because as a CONCACAF team in the FIFA ranking, because don't forget that those six first teams in the CONCACAF region, as per the ranking of FIFA, will play the hex, and that will play a qualification process in order to qualify for World Cup 2022. And you know what? By being in the hex, you have 3 chances out of 6 to be qualified to the World Cup. Or else, if you're out of the top 6, you have to play a whole tournament between the 7th that will be played between the team ranked 7th and until the team ranked, I think, 35. And the winner of that tournament will play another game against the 4th place team in the hex to qualify to the World Cup. And you know what? It's but like you, by not being in the top 6, you're really making the job very difficult to qualify to World Cup 2022. Now, you know what? It's going to be hard either way. We knew it was going to be hard. Now, it's important to see what the other teams are going to do in this Nations League, because there are a few games left. The other teams that are placed right now, 7th, 8th, and 9th, I think it's Panama, it's Curacao, and it's Salvador. If those 3 teams go ahead of us, we'll have until June 2020 to rectify that and to make sure we're in the top 6 in order to move on to the hex.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It does make life a little more difficult, and we'll probably come through whatever group we're drawn in. But it's just all these extra games, and especially when you look at Canada, they're pulling players from all around the world as well. It's not a great scenario. The other thing I kind of noted about last night was, and I think this is probably what disappointed me too, was. Although the US started the game at a greater tempo, the Canadians fueled that by conceding so early. But what I would say, and I heard some of the American commentators enthusing about the way their team had played, and that's fair enough. And sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's easy to get carried away. But I wasn't overly impressed by the US. And granted, they were under strength, and I'm glad Pulisic wasn't playing, because things could have been a lot worse for Canada. But I wasn't overly impressed by the United States team. In fact, if you look at that first 34, 35 minutes, they were 3-0 up, but they didn't have to work for those goals. Canada gave them up. It was so poor from the visiting team.
Exactly, and we've seen it on exactly what I was saying before, and it's always due to the same thing: the two fullbacks being too high up the field of the pitch, and a counterattack with, of course, a very dense midfield from the US, with 2 wingers, very pacey wingers, and they got us all 3 times, or at least they got either a free kick because of that. On I think the second goal, it was a free kick, and it always came because of that. Like the counterattack, the beginning of the action came because of that, because we had 2 fullbacks, very offensive fullbacks, and we've seen Alphonso Davies sometimes not being very diligent in his defensive duties, and as a left back, you can't really do that. If you're a winger, you can sometimes get away with it, but as a fullback, you can't, and that's what we saw. And
with those 2 wide defenders, we would have been better playing with 3 centre backs. There's absolutely no doubt about it.
True. If you had 3 center backs with Davies and Larea, I would have said, you know what, it kind of makes sense. But it didn't. It didn't make sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, you know what? Now I think the US will have to beat, of course, Cuba in the next game. I think that will be played on Tuesday, the
Yeah,
19th,
it's
in
a
order
fore,
to.
it's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, it is. Don't forget that Canada had a big didn't it wasn't easy for them. They just won, like, I think 1-0, if I'm not mistaken, in Cuba, because the field wasn't good at all. So you know what? There's like 0.00001%
Yeah,
that the
yeah,
US don't get a win,
yeah.
because they need a win. If they get a
But
draw only in Cuba,
but they're
then
not
Canada will still be first.
they're not even playing in Cuba. They're playing in Grand Cayman.
Exactly. Same thing as Canada in Grand Cayman.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, so we'll see about that. It's a pity. I just hope that, of course, Canada will have, in case they don't finish first, which is like almost impossible for them to finish first. But in case they finish second, then they won't move on in a Nations League, and that's not a problem. But they'll have to have friendlies in order to get more points in the rankings, in order to keep that sixth place or even get a fifth place
Yeah.
in June 2020, to make it to the Hex. So we'll have to see which decisions Canada Soccer is going to make for friendlies in 2020, and that's going to be, I think, very, very important for the future of Canada Soccer in their qualification for the World Cup 2022.
Yeah, because to get in the top six, they really have to be organising friendlies and winning them. But I think what this team needs, if you look at the games that they've lost under John Herdman, they've lost the big game away to the US, they've lost the game against Haiti in the Gold Cup, and they've lost to Mexico in the Gold Cup. It's the big games when they're not at home against quality opposition where we fall down. And so I think this is a conundrum, right? They need to organise friendlies and win them, but they also need to play against better nations.
Yeah, true. But you know what? They did win a game against the US. So that's already that. It's not that they never won a big game yet. So at least they have that going for them. And they also won, I think,
Yeah,
no, that's it. That's
but
it. That's,
they don't look good on the road, and
you're right.
all the other teams that they've beaten, they're not of sufficient quality where the Canadians are going to go out and learn something about themselves in how they play, because they're all games that they should win comfortably.
Yeah, you're completely right. And it's going to be important. And like you said, it's going to be important to win those big games. And like I said, the friendlies have to be in against strong teams. Why? Because the stronger the team is, and the stronger the team is, the more points you get in the rankings, right? So you have to get like friendlies against teams in I would say in the top 60 of the rankings. So you know what? Big games coming up. If they want to make it to the Hex, big games coming up, and they have to step up. And John Herdman has to step up, because, we can't have another World Cup without at least trying as much as possible to qualify. We have a golden age in Canada on the men's side, and we need really to take advantage of it. So we'll see what's going to happen in the next few months or next few weeks, because I'm sure in order to get friendlies, they need to start working right now, because the other countries are getting ready to announce their schedules too. So we'll see what's going to happen. I hope some good things for Canada.
Yeah, we need defenders. We need defenders.
Yeah, we need the defenders. I think that with Cornelius and Vittoria, with Kamal Miller on the left and Richie Larrea on the right, we're kind of okay. But we will need at least one or two defenders. I'm happy that at least John Herdman picked two defenders from the Canadian Premier League, and I think two of the best defenders, with Dominic Zaiter and Amer Didic, two great defenders. So there's maybe talent there. Maybe give a chance to those players to show what they're capable of. Maybe they can surprise you, and I think they will, because they're very, very good players. So we'll see in the future.
Yeah, I still think it's too big of a step to step from Canadian Premier League at the minute into full international level. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my gut feel. I know Zator has done well, and he got that goal that beat Vancouver, I believe, in the Canadian Championship and all that. And it's great that there is a supply of players through that Canadian Premier League now, and I'm sure it'll continue to develop. But I just think right at the moment it's too big of a jump. And you know what, with Victoria and Cornelius together in the back four, I agree with you. Maybe just okay, but you know, I look at some quality international sides, and in fact, I look at some average international sides throughout Europe, and I would ask myself the question: would those two be the centre backs for the likes of a Bosnia, a Northern Ireland, even a Republic of Ireland, a Wales, a Bulgaria? I'm not sure they would be.
Yeah, you know what would be great would be if Tomori changed his mind and agrees to play for Canada. But last time he was called up for England, he didn't play yet, so he's not cap-tied yet.
Yeah.
But he later said that he was committed to England and he doesn't want to play for neither Nigeria or Canada. It's a pity because if we had that defender, Tomori is awesome. For people who don't know him, Fikayo Tomori, he plays for Chelsea and he's been pretty good. Yeah. He's born in Alberta, in Calgary, and it would have been, I think, the perfect player to join the team and to make us, I think, whole. That's what I think.
You have Tomori available. If you had Tomori available, he'd be straight in that team.
Yeah, exactly. But he doesn't want to play for Canada. And you know what? I kind of understand his decision. If you have a chance playing for England versus Canada, I kind of understand why you would choose England, because you'll get, into a very, very big competitions like pretty instantly. You go through qualifications, but, who are we kidding? England was always going to make it most of the time they're going to make it in big competitions. So... Yeah. I kind of understand his decision, but I'm still disappointed. But we'll see. Maybe John Herdman and his staff will be able to find good players. There's Manjrekar James that's been left out of the squad in the past few times. He's a very good central defender. He plays in Denmark with Midtjylland. So, that could be a solution. He's 26. Maybe that could be a solution. He did very well with Canada when he was called up. Mm. So maybe we can look at that. We'll see. Let's move on to our next subject, and that's going to be, of course, the Montreal Impact. Like I said earlier, first of all, the big news. Okay, we're going to go chronologically. And the big news was Thierry Henry, who signed as a head coach for the Montreal Impact. It was very surprising because there wasn't any kind of rumor concerning Thierry Henry. I've read so many really obscure rumors, like a coach in Belgium called Philippe Mazou or something like that. Another coach. I've even heard someone say that, the Impact is having discussion with the head coach that's currently contracted with another club, so they can't really divulge the discussions. And all that was BS, because when Thierry Henry was named, Kevin Gilmour said we didn't interview anybody else than Thierry Henry. So you know what? Be careful about those rumors. Some of those rumors are coming from very well-known journalists. Unfortunately, I don't know why they're giving those rumors, or maybe they gave some suggestions and people thought there were actual tractations, but there wasn't any discussions between other coaches and the Montreal Impact. The only guy they interviewed was Thierry Henry, and we also heard from Gilmour that it was Thierry Henry that proposed his services to the Impact. So the Impact didn't look for him. They just got his name. They got a phone call from him, and they're like, you know what? Yeah, let's discuss this. And they got Thierry Henry as a head coach. What do you think about that, Paul?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, and I think, as you say, there were a lot of rumors. I think there's a lot of guesswork going on in the media. And another name that came up was Laszlo Baloni, the former Romanian international, who's actually contracted to Antwerp at the moment. So, that's obviously another one that wasn't true. It's amazing that somebody of the stature of Thierry Henry has approached the Impact and offered his services. It speaks volumes for the club, actually, and I think obviously the whole francophone part of it is something that has appealed to. I almost said the player, because I still think of Thierry Henry as a player, but I think that's obviously something that's appealed to Thierry Henry as well. And I hope he's serious about developing his coaching career, because things maybe haven't gone that well for him in that respect at this stage. But I think it's wonderful that he's offered his services, because you also might have thought that he'd have gone to New York, because Don Torrent is gone as well. Although wrong club in New York, but
very wrong club, man. They don't like each other, Paul.
Yeah, I know, but he might have waited on the Red Bulls job coming up. I don't know, but I think it's fantastic that he's contacted Montreal. It surprises me. He's got a great stature. I am concerned about how well he can apply himself to the job, because somebody as big as him, has other interests and things like that. And, another thing that concerns me is how he'll work with players. And I think he lost patience with a lot of players at Monaco, possibly because they weren't able to execute things at the same level as what he would have expected to be able to do as a player. And I always called that the Roy Keane syndrome, because I think that was a big problem of Roy Keane after he left Manchester United, or after he left Celtic actually, and went into management. He was expecting players at the second tier level to be able to do the things that he could do, and he got frustrated when they couldn't. And I don't think he mastered that well. And I think there was a little bit of that went on with Thierry Henry at Monaco as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles the players at Montreal Impact. But I don't think this is a shoe-in. I think it's fantastic that you've got a fantastic motivator. And I think even when he did all his stuff with Belgium, he wasn't the assistant coach. He was the second assistant coach. And then just before he took the Monaco job, he became the assistant coach once the other guy, Graham Jones, went to take the West Bromwich Albion job. So he was only assistant coach for 2 or 3 months before he went to Monaco. And all the stuff that I read about Thierry Henry when he was with Belgium, it was all motivational stuff, and it was all about working with the forwards and the strikers. So as an overall head coach, I think the jury for me is out. I'm delighted he's here, because it lifts the club's status, and it lifts its stature, and he may be able to attract players and motivate others. All I'm saying is it's interesting, but it's not a shoe-in that he's going to be successful.
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna just I'm just gonna talk about two big points. Okay, the first one, I'm gonna talk about pros and cons. Okay, let's talk about pros. Okay, the pros are Thierry Henry is a very well-known figure in soccer, like in soccer around the world, and that's
huge,
very important.
Huge.
It's huge, and he's going to be able to have, of course, contacts with a lot of people. A lot of people are going to maybe contact him. To a lot of agents are maybe going to contact him in order to offer their players. That could be very good for the aura of the Montreal Impact. Okay, that's one of the biggest, I think, pros of hiring Thierry Henry. The second thing is that it's a big marketing coup from the Montreal Impact, and we've seen already what we've seen an impact from that hire there, because there's a lot of players, a lot of people I've seen on Twitter. There's a lot of people that really renewed their season tickets as soon as they heard the news. As soon as that was official. I've seen a few tweets saying, you know what, I renewed my season tickets just because Thierry Henry signed with the Impact. I've even seen tweets of people, I'm buying my first season ticket just because Thierry Henry signed with the Impact. So you know what? As a marketing coup, that's awesome for the Impact. Okay, that's the second pro, and the third one is the kind of experience that he's going to be able to give to the players as you know, as a player himself, and that's going to be very important for the players to learn from such a legend as a player. And you know what, that could be very interesting, at least in the beginning. Now the cons, and that's going to be very important, because you know, we can be very happy, and I'm very happy to be able to see Thierry Henry here, but there are some cons. Okay, yeah, he did have a very rocky beginning of his coaching career with Monaco, but you can't really talk about that and judge him about that, because Monaco was really not in a good place. A lot of injuries, a lot of problems in the dressing room, and he's a very demanding coach, because he was a very demanding player. Don't forget that Thierry Henry was not the kind of player to be all nice and comfy and chatty on the training field. He was very demanding of his teammates. He used to yell a lot, and he used to ask a lot of his teammates. And he's going to be exactly the same as a head coach.
Well, so, I agree. I agree with that, and I think that works. When you're talking about Premier League and the top levels of football, I think that works.
Yeah.
I'm a wee bit more concerned. I'm a wee bit more concerned that the same model will work in MLS, where the level is a little bit less.
Exactly, and you know what? As a coach, a lot of fans complained about Rémi Garde being a bit arrogant and being a bit too demanding. You're not gonna like Thierry Henry if you don't like that, because he's gonna be worse.
The king is dead, long live the king. Yeah, we got another one, right?
Exactly. We got another one. And you know what? I don't think it's bad, because if he's able to change the mentalities in that Montreal Impact team, you can have like great players, like great, I would say, a diamond in the rough, like Balou Tabla, let's say, maybe develop into a great player. And if he's able to get to him, and that's going to be very interesting to see. But you know what? That's a con. Why? Because it's a big task to ask from such an inexperienced manager, because he's not experienced, Thierry Henry, as a manager.
Yeah.
The
Do you not think? Sorry, and I know you're going.
Go ahead.
One, but do you not think as well? He really's got to have a good coaching staff around him here, because when I think about Rémi Garde, not Rémi Garde. Sorry, when I think about Thierry Henry, I mean, it's flair, it's everything that's good about the game. An absolutely fantastic player, one of the greatest players of our time. There's no doubt about that. But
Paul, there's telepathy between us there, because you read my mind there, because that's exactly my second point. I was saying that he needs to be surrounded with a coaching staff that's experienced. Yeah. Because he's going to be like, if you want to, the legend, the ex-player, the legend, and the one that inspires. Yeah, exactly. That inspires the players. And a very important part of the job. That's like maybe 50% of the job as a head coach is to inspire the players, right? Yeah. But he needs to have those coaches that have experience. I've read rumors today that his coaching staff, Patrice Bernier, will be part of his coaching staff. That's what I read. And I read also that another guy that I don't really know, that's called, I think, Pandu. I don't know him very well, but that's a coach that coached maybe at the semi-professional level. And they talked also about Wilfried Nancy, that's been here for a few years. But I think if it's only those three, it's not enough. You need to have someone with experience come in. So I completely agree with your point, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see him as somebody who I don't see him. If we have to go out and play defensively in certain games, I'm not sure he's the right man to be setting the team up. And some stuff I read about him, and I followed some of his stuff at Monaco, where he didn't have a good time. And everybody's automatically going to think about Thierry Henry, that the Impact are absolutely bound to play with lots of flair next year. I'm not sure that that's going to happen. And I think, when you look at some of the stuff written about him when he was at Monaco, the fans and players there were actually a little bit a little bit demoralized by some of the negative tactics he deployed, like filling the midfield, maybe a bit like what we talked about, the US having a robust, strong, dense midfield. And I think he tried to do the same at Monaco, and it didn't work. And the other thing that concerned me about Monaco is it's depends what you read as well, of course, but there seems to be a fairly popular school of thought out there that it was player power that in the end got rid of him.
Yeah, true. You know what? It's gonna be it's gonna, but you can't really judge Thierry Henry, on his Monaco tenure because
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think
because
that's fair.
it's like you're judging Remy Gard on his Aston Villa days, and we all know what happened in Aston Villa. The team was in was really in bad shape, and people that don't like Remy Gard keep on coming by saying, "Oh, he was the worst manager in Aston Villa." But I'm sorry, Aston Villa was the worst team at that time. So you know what? You can't really judge Remy Gard on Aston Villa. It's the same thing for Thierry Henry. The problem is that Thierry Henry doesn't have another team that he coached well in his resume. In his resume, as of Remy Gard does have Lyon, where he did very well. So you know what? You're kind of with the same profile of manager that you had under Remy Gard. That's how I look at it. But with a guy that's like known to a very, very, very high level, and maybe that's gonna change. Maybe that's gonna inspire those players to maybe hear a bit more what Thierry Henry has to say compared to Remy Gard. I'm very, very curious to see what's gonna happen. But you know what? I'm sure that Thierry Henry was already involved into a few decisions, because we talked about that list, because we have the expansion draft coming up on the 19th. So that's on Tuesday the 19th. And today was the day where the Montreal Impact had to give the list of the players that are protected by the Montreal Impact that can't be picked by Nashville and Inter Miami. So they had a choice to make, because they can only protect 12 players, and the homegrown players are, of course, not eligible for the draft, so you don't need to protect them. And there's a list the list that came out. Do you want to talk about the eligible players for the draft, or do you prefer to talk about the protected players that we're going to keep for sure? We're going to keep like the rights for sure. I'm not sure if they're going to be here next year, but we're gonna keep their rights. So what do you think?
I think it's best maybe to talk about the players that are at risk of losing or moving. And I see that he hasn't protected his old friend Bakary Sagna.
Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest name, I think, on that list eligible for the draft. So you have Bakary Sagna, but you have also Rudy Camacho, you have Evan Bush, you have Rod Fanny, you have Anthony Jackson-Hamel, you have Ken Kroliki, you have Maximiliano Urruti, you have Jason Vargas, but that's like normal. You have Amar Sejdic, I don't think anybody's going to pick him. And you have Jorge Corrales also. Don't forget, and Omar Brown too, Zachary Brault-Guillard, and I talked about him too. Don't forget that Zachary Brault-Guillard, from what I heard and what I read, Lyon doesn't want to loan him again. If they want to give him up, it's going to be a transfer. And I read somewhere that it's $3 million for the transfer. So who's going to pay $3 million for a right back?
But he's not going to end up in MLS if that's the case.
I don't think so. Then for the rest, you have Rod Fanny, Rudy Camacho, Bakary Sagna, Jorge Corrales. All those three players are out of contract. So you're gonna have to renegotiate. Yeah, maybe you can pick them up, but you're gonna have to negotiate a new contract with them. And I'm not really sure you really want to, negotiate a contract with a 38-year-old and a almost 37-year-old with Sagna. And Camacho is already, and you have Camacho and Bush who have very high salaries. So it's gonna be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I don't think there's any surprises when you look at the list, to be honest. So there's players listed mainly either because they're high salaried or they're too old in their career, and certainly the Impact need to reduce the average age of the squad. They obviously need to get rid of some of the higher salaries to help bring new players in, because I don't know how long Olivier Renard's discussions have been ongoing with Thierry Henry, but I'm sure Henry has his own ideas about some players he would like to bring in, and obviously we have to make room for that, and we have to have the finance to do it too. So, some of these guys have to go, even if some of them are old favourites, and some of them really have to go to make room for a rebuilding job. And I think it's probably not the worst thing in the world. I think it's probably the right way to go. It's an exciting time at the club, because there's going to be plenty of news for us to talk about. And, there's going to be, I would say, quite a bit of movement. There's some players there, obviously, who the Impact have left unprotected. No club's going to come in for them anyway, and that's because either they're on too high a salary or they're too late in their careers. But an interesting time, and I would hope that the profile of player that we're looking for going forward is a younger player, somebody that we can bring in, develop, use for a couple of years. Use in a nice way, and move on with the transfer fee that kind of helps Montreal Impact, and I think that's a model that we need to. We've talked about this before, and I think that's what we need to see, and I would hope that Thierry Henry would be of the same mind.
Exactly, and I want to just point out two things on that list there. First of all, you have 6 international players that on that unprotected list. Okay, 6 international players. Don't forget that in MLS you have only 8 international spots. So every time if you want to use a 9th spot, you have to trade for it. And those 6 players. There's Jason Vargas. There's Bakary Sagna. There's Rod Fanny. There's Rudy Camacho. There's Omar Brown, and that's Zachary Broguillard. So you know what? That's 6 players that if Miami and Nashville want to pick them up, they have to understand that they're using also an international spot for them.
Yeah.
So that's going to be very interesting to see. That's one of the things that we have to say. The second thing that we have to say, and that's I want to talk about those players that were protected. Okay, so you have Clément Diop. That's also, from what I heard, out of contract too. So that means that they're counting on him. That's very nice. They have, surprisingly, Victor Cabrera. That's protected. Raitala, that's been a very good player. Daniel Lovitz, that's also without contract right now, and that's very, very unusual for me. I didn't think I'll find him on the protected list, but here he is. Lapalainen and Okonkwo. It's very important to know. I understand that Lapalainen and Okonkwo are loaned by Bologna to Montreal, but for people who don't know, being loaned from a club from Europe to a club in MLS doesn't mean that you're 100% the property of the club, because in MLS, it's very particular. The players are owned by the MLS and not by the club. So by owning the players, the MLS, they can switch them wherever they want in the league. So they're not contracted to the Impact. They're contracted to the MLS. So let's say Lapalainen wasn't protected. Nashville could have picked him up, even if he's only loaned by Bologna, because he's loaned to the MLS and not to the Impact. So very important that. Then Piatti was protected, Piet was protected, Taider was protected, Boyan was protected, Shom was protected, and of course, and that's, I think, a very big surprise, it's Balou Tabla. Balou Tabla is protected, so that means, are we going to see another loan from Barcelona to Montreal? Very interesting. Very, very interesting to see the choices. Victor Cabrera is protected again. I still don't understand why, but he is protected. So, you know what? What do you think about that? Those protected players? Are you surprised by some choices?
I scratched my head about Tabla for sure. I think he's had chances at this football club here in Montreal, and I think sometimes he just hasn't treated the club or its people with respect. And I don't know if it's a good sign that we want to keep this guy, and he's got a talent, but he's never used it, or it just doesn't seem to be developing the way everybody thought it might. So, I mean, that one for me is a little bit of a surprise. And as you're right, it looks like another loan from Barcelona is coming, but I think you talked about maybe Thierry Henry can get in his head. Maybe that's the case, and maybe he will turn him around. But I think that's a risk.
Yeah, he learned a lot from Drogba, right? Tabla when he was here, and he said it's my big brother and everything. I still talk to him right now, so maybe they think that Thierry Henry could have the same effect on Tabla, and that could be very beneficial for Montreal Impact because we do know the qualities that Balu Tabla have. So if he's able to maybe develop into a professional player, because he's not a professional player, he's still a street player for me. He's not.
He is. He is.
He's really a diamond, a rough diamond. So let's see if we can polish him a bit and make him that jewel that he's supposed to be. Maybe Thierry Henry is going to be able to do that. And
the goalkeeper situation is an interesting one.
And you know what? A lot of players a lot of people on Twitter are hoping that Nashville or Miami pick up Evan Bush. In order to free up a bit of salary, but also give the number one spot to Diop. Very interesting to see. Urruti is not protected.
But you see the goalkeeper one. What's your view on it, Hady? Do you think that Bush's name is on the list because the Impact don't think anybody will bite because of his salary?
No, I think they hope. I think they hope that he's gonna be picked up. Because they need to free up, like you said, salary on the cap. So
in your opinion, you think they see Clement Diop as the way forward?
Yeah, and we've seen Clement Diop what he's able to do. Now, I want people to understand he's not he's not Buffon, Clement Diop. He's not going to be Manuel Neuer of the Impact, but he's a good goalkeeper. He's a decent goalkeeper, and I think he can do exactly the same job as Bush did, differently because he's way more spectacular in his saves. But I think he could be a good number one for the Impact, of course, with a lower salary. So for me, it's the same kind of player. The ability is the same, and if you can get the same kind of goalkeeper for a lesser price, why not?
So it's not just a matter of getting rid of Evan Bush. Obviously, there's a bigger picture, right?
Exactly. And he did his time, Evan Bush. He was great for the Impact, and he's been here for a long time. I love the guy. He's really nice, but he has some things that he needs to improve on. His communication skills, they are very low for me. There's a lot of things that he needs to improve on, and he's already 31, maybe 32 now. So I think it's time for us to see someone else between the sticks here in Montreal.
So Shamit Chom has also been retained, or sorry, that's the wrong word, protected.
Yeah, and I think that's 100% logical because he's been the most improved player in the Impact between 2017 and 2019.
Yeah.
And I think he deserves a spot.
You can see that he's beginning to develop. I think he probably got too many games for his own good last year, simply out of necessity. But he seems to have a good head on himself and. The right attitude and willing to learn, and you can see that there's a good potential that Shamit will continue to develop, and I think we'll probably see an even better Shamit show next season than what we have up until now. But I agree with you. You can see his development throughout the last season as well. I just think sometimes young players will have a little bit of a dip in form during the season too, and that's to my comment about maybe he played a little bit too many times last season. And I think there was a little bit of a dip at times, but it's all part of his education, all part of his experience, and he'd be a better player at the end of the day for it. So I'm not concerned about keeping him. I think it's probably the right move. What about Mathieu Choinière?
Mathieu Choinière is protected because he's a homegrown, right? All the homegrowns are protected automatically, right? So they can't be picked up by the expansion draft. So you have Mathieu Choinière, you have Clément Baillat, you have Daniel Kinumbe, Kari Fayao, you have James Pantemis. All those players are protected, and there's a lot of them. Anthony Jackson-Amand, he's not protected. There's some sort of weird thing going on. I'm not really. I don't know why. I don't know the technicalities to know why he's not protected, but he's not. He's not automatically
Yeah,
protected.
because you tend to think
It's
he's
very weird.
homegrown, right?
Yeah, but he's not. He's not protected. I think that it was because he's born before a certain year
Right.
when that rule came into place. I think that's it. But you know what? I hope that we're gonna have a big salary picked up. Either not because I don't like them, but because we need to free up a bit of
Yeah.
salary on a salary cap. So I would say either Bush, Camacho, or even Uruti. That I think that will be a good thing for the Montreal Impact in the future. If you have to choose one player, Paul, which player would be for you the one that should be picked up for our own good as Montreal Impact supporters?
Um, I think you probably know my answer.
Oh no, I don't. I'm very curious to know.
I think probably the player that I would like to see picked up from the list that's unprotected is Rudy Camacho.
Oh, okay. I thought you were gonna say Uruti.
No, I didn't think a Rudy was a disaster last season.
Yeah,
I
me
think
neither.
there's a job he can do for the team. I understand why he's on that list and his salary and all the rest, and he's supposed to be a goal scorer and he wasn't. But you know what? Anybody who follows MLS knows he's not prolific before he came to the Impact. So maybe our recruitment was lacking in that respect, and maybe somebody didn't do their homework. I don't know, but the guy is a player, and I think he could do a job for us. Do we keep him? I think if we get the right, if somebody comes in to take him at his salary, I'd probably be prepared to let him go. But if we had to keep him, I wouldn't be so concerned. But he wouldn't be my up top centre forward. He wouldn't be my main source of goals because that's not the type of player that he is.
You know what? I agree with you for Camacho. I agree with you with Cerruti also. Um, but the player that I want the most to be picked up, and not only for our sake, because for our sake, yeah, we're going to free up salary, but also for his sake, is Evan Bush. I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
be very honest. For me, Evan Bush he reached his peak, and I don't think he can improve anymore. And I think it's time for us to free up space for the up and coming goalkeepers. We have Clément Dia, but we also have James Pantemis. That's been a player that's been a prospect, a hot prospect for the Impact for a lot of years, and he's now what, almost 22, if I'm not mistaken.
Do you know the thing that gets me about James Pantemis, and it goes back to this issue about not having a reserve team. I don't know how these guys keep match fit and keep their
Yeah,
sharpness. And
true.
when James Pantemis came into the team I think he maybe played in one or two of the Canadians. He certainly played in one. I remember one of the games he played against. I think it was against York 9
Yeah.
in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
The guy looked so shaky and nervous, and he just looked. I don't know how players. It really takes me to the fair that we don't have a reserve. And I know there are challenges because of the size of the country and the distances between clubs in the league and stuff. But I don't know how we can survive in a full-time professional environment in MLS without a reserve team. It
I
doesn't make
completely
sense.
understand, and I think that's a big issue that Olivier Renard, Kevin Gilmore, and even Thierry Henry will have to solve, because don't forget that right now we have the Fury that doesn't exist anymore, so
Yeah.
you can't really give players to the Fury for them to play them like we did with Kanumbe, like we did with Baya, like we did with Crépeau at one point before trading him for nothing. So
If I was Pantemis and I could get another club interested in me, I'd be
I
gone.
would go. Yeah, me
Even if
too.
it's a lower level. The one
Yeah,
thing I
for
would
sure.
say about Clement Diop, he sat in his ass on the bench all year too, and huge credit to him. When he did come into the team, he did exceptionally well. So I got to acknowledge that, and he's been in the same situation as Pantemis, where he didn't get any real game time. They got to organise game time for these players who are not getting regular game time. I don't know how they do it, but they got to find a way.
Yeah, true. They do have to find a way. I don't know what they're gonna do, but a solution has to be found and very fast. I think we'll see. We'll see what's gonna happen. A very interesting chat. I think today, Paul. We talked about a lot of stuff. I can't wait to do another podcast with you to discuss the draft, to discuss everything. I just need to tell our listeners there that there are a lot of players available for that draft. A lot of good players available for that draft. If you look at Atlanta, let's say, you have players like Justin Merrim that's available for the draft. You have Jeff Larentovitz. Yes, that's maybe he's old, but he can be very good. You have at Chicago, you have an Nemanja Nikolic that's available. That's very interesting. Yes, I've heard.
Can we buy a pair of boots for Thierry Henry?
Yeah, that would be awesome. But you have a lot of players available for in the draft, so that's very interesting. So maybe don't forget that each of the teams will have 5 picks. So maybe there won't be any players picked up by Nashville and Miami from the Impact, and that's a big possibility too, because there are a lot of players, a lot of interesting players. If you look at, I'm looking at the names now. You look at Philadelphia, you have Medunjanin that's available. You have Marco Fabian that's available. You have Zarek Valentin from in Portland. So you have players. You have a lot of players available. So
Valentin obviously is a former Impact player, and I'm just looking through the list here, and I can see that Laurent Simon is back on the he's on the list, and John Baquero down at Toronto, who didn't really work out, I guess.
And even Nicolas Benezet, the Frenchman, that just came in into the squad and was really good in the playoffs. So very weird to see him not protected, if you want my opinion.
Yeah, and another Impact player who's not protected at, where is he? Seattle is Harry Shipp, which probably doesn't surprise me that much, but another former Impact player. But there's one there in the Toronto list, Ryan Telfer. What do you think about Ryan Telfer?
He's out of contract, just for people that don't know. He's out of contract, but he can be picked up because, as I said earlier, the rights of Ryan Telfer in MLS are for Toronto, so he has to be picked up in order to sign a contract with Nashville or Inter Miami. He's had a very good year in the Canadian Premier League. For me, he was on my starting 11. Looking at, because I watched a lot of games of Canadian Premier League. He was very good. I think he has like he could play in the at the MLS level. He could be an important player, not a regular starter the first year, maybe just as a rotation player for the first year or two, and then he can develop into a very, very good player because he's a very physical winger. He's good at finishing. He finishes I think he scored, I don't know how many goals he scored, but he scored a few goals, and he was very good for York 9 last year. So yeah, I won't be surprised if he's picked up. I don't think he's going to be picked up in the expansion draft, but if he is, I won't be surprised, because that would mean that Nashville and Inter Miami, they did their homework and they watched the Canadian Premier League and they were able to see what Ryan Telfer is able to give them.
Yeah. And another name I see on that is Bedoya and Harris Medunjanin as well.
Yeah.
So there, you're right. There are some good. There is some quality in the list. There's no doubt about that.
Alex Roldan, Benny Feldharber.
Yeah.
You have very good players there. So
there's a few players there you would take from Montreal, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right away. I think you can take at maybe 25 players from there from Montreal.
Yeah, I know. Do you know as well? We talked about Telfer. I would have thought that he's somebody who might be able to do a job for Montreal too.
Yeah.
But anyway, you never know what's going to happen there. I don't see him spending another season in Can PL because I think he's good enough to play at a higher level. I agree with you too. He might not be an absolute regular, but I think he's, from what I've seen of that kid, he's got some ability, and I think he's got a chance. I remember when I watched him play for York 9, he totally stood out in that team. He was the best player. He
was very good with York 9. Maybe not the best player, because I loved the center back from York 9, Luca Gasparotto. He was awesome. And you had the left back, Diaidine Abzi, that was really good too. And for me, There are two players. These are two players that were in my starting 11.
Do you know what? Abzi, absolutely. I'd forgotten that name. It had gone off my radar, but he was brilliant against us.
Yeah.
And he's from Montreal, right?
Yeah, he is. He played in Blainville in the PLSQ before, so he's a very good player. And you know what? I've seen you talked about Bedoya. It's not Alejandro Bedoya that's available. Okay,
Oh, is it?
It's the other Bedoya. He's not really known.
Okay.
So just so we can give the right answers to our listeners. But also you have Sasha Kestan that's available. Yeah. I just saw his name right now. So yeah. A lot of good players available in that draft. Let's wait and see what's going to happen for Nashville and Inter Miami. But they're going to have the tough choices to make because 5 players each. They can get a lot of veterans into their young teams. Very interesting. Very interesting. That I think it's the most interesting expansion draft I've seen this far in the MLS.
Hady, before we close, I want to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Is Thierry Henry going to be a success at Montreal Impact?
I don't know.
I don't need a long explanation. A yes, no, or maybe might do.
It's just very easy to say maybe, but I can't say either yes or no. There's too many question marks. In order to give a definite answer. When you asked me the questions for Wilmer Cabrera, I told you no from the beginning. Yeah. And I think I was right. So Thierry Henry, I would say maybe.
So you can't say yes, but you won't say no. That's what you're saying, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I think I'm in the same boat. I'm in the same boat.
Yeah. We'll see. Very interesting off-season for the Montreal Impact that's going to have to rebuild once again from scratch. The Impact, it's not really, has not been successful, has not qualified in playoffs for 3 years in a row. So things need to be done, decisions need to be made, and, the future starts now. So let's see what's going to happen. Paul, I want to thank you very much for doing that podcast with me. I want to also thank, of course, our Can FC, who is hosting the podcast. Thanks a lot, guys, for helping us put this podcast on your platform. And Paul, I'll see you next time. I hope we're gonna record another episode maybe next week. We're gonna talk a bit about that expansion draft. We'll see. We'll talk about it a bit further off the record.
You know what? There's plenty. It's off season, but there's plenty happening, and there's plenty happening all around the world in football too. And I've got my fingers and toes crossed for this afternoon because I'll be watching Northern Ireland against Holland and hoping we can get something out of that game in the Euros. But yes, I'd like to thank everyone for listening in too, and thanks also to Can FC for giving us the platform. And once again, Hady, as always, it's been a pleasure.
It's been really a pleasure. I hope that you get as much luck as I got with Lebanon that drew against South Korea 0-0.
Oh, that's a good result.
That's a great result. So that means that Lebanon is very close to qualify for the next round of the World Cup. They have three games left, and they're in second position. So they could even... They have to play in South Korea, so that's I think a loss. But we'll see what's going to happen. But fingers crossed for you for Northern Ireland to get as good as a result that we got against South Korea.
Yeah, I'll probably settle for a draw because it probably gives us an absolute certainty for a playoff spot, which is probably more than or as much as we can hope for at the moment. But it would be lovely to beat the Dutch at home. I know. We were one up against them away from home with 15 minutes to go and lost the game 3-1. So even if we do take the lead with 10 minutes to go, I'll not be counting any chickens.
Perfect. So good luck for the game. Thanks everybody for listening to us. Please talk to us, ask us questions, share our podcast, talk about us, and thanks again for listening to us, and see you next time.